Spoiler alert for Honkai Star Rail Update 2.0 and forward. And also, MatPat's FNAF security breach theories, strangely enough. You'll see why. Enjoy the chaos. Please relax. Feel the ebb and flow of your body. Imagine you're in paradise. Let yourself drift in the vast ocean of your thoughts. Let yourself feel the tides of the shadows shifting beneath you. They're watching you. They know your name. What is their name? Hello, Internet people! It's your favorite not okay girl coming back at you with another unhinged Star Rail theory. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, I'm done. I'm sorry. All jokes aside, this video has been really difficult to make, so if you'd like to leave a like and subscribe, that would be amazing. I hit 700 followers thanks to my last Star Rail video about Firefly, and talking with you guys in the comments has been an absolute blast. So if I get to the end of this theory and there are things you want to add, stuff you're confused about, or if you have theories of your own, put it down in the comments and we can talk about it. Let's get started on this theory. Except, how do I start on this? I've known I wanted to make this video since before I started working on the one about Firefly, but I actually had like 4 different possibilities for my sort of main point of the theory, and the more I tried to think through, okay, which one am I gonna actually focus on, the more these 4 theories started to link together like a string of magnets. I cannot focus on one of them, I have to do them all. So hopefully this video isn't half an hour long. So, where to begin? Let's start with the crying child because they truly are the central figure of this theory. Everything links back to them, which, if I had a nickel for every time a crying child was the mysterious central figure in a giant video game saga,
I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
Yes, doof. Yes, it is. The first time we hear the crying child's voice is when we're entering the dreamscape for the first time. They're sobbing and calling for someone named Mikhail, and it's out of place enough to catch our attention. It doesn't quite fit in with the vibe of the family's perfect dream world, but because we're dropped literally into the dazzling golden party that is Penacony immediately afterwards, we put it to the side. By the way, I made a short about how Hoyo psychologically conditioned us not to ask questions about Penacony. You should go check that out after this because it's really fascinating. From that point on, we don't hear from the crying child again until we in Firefly get yeeted into the primal dreamscape by Sparkle. Once we're there, not only do we hear their voice, we also see their words superimposed in space. Once again, they're calling for someone named Mikhail. Although he does eventually find Mikhail, we never hear Mikhail's voice. We're confined to the crying child's perspective, like being in the room with someone on the phone and only hearing half the conversation. Once the crying child finds Mikhail, it becomes apparent that Mikhail is trying to go away. The crying child begs Mikhail to take the crying child with him, but is apparently refused. Instead, Mikhail seems to give something to the crying child to take care of because the crying child says,
"Wow, it's beautiful. I will definitely keep it safe."
From there, the dream devolves into nightmarish madness, with the child begging for Mikhail to come back and telling someone don't let him get away, before we are finally chased out of the child's dream by the mimetic entity and back into reality. I'm sorry, I refuse to call it a meme. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Now, long explanations aside, figuring out the identity of the crying child is about as straightforward as this theory gets, because we actually see him while first entering the dream in the reverie, as he's shouting for Mikhail, and I mean quite literally in the middle of the word. We get a brief flash of the lower half of the child's face, and it's very obviously Misha. Honestly, all I can say is, who else would it be? Besides having the same voice, he's the character who seems to be the most intrinsically linked to Penacony. Not only was he the first Penaconian character we interacted with, period, he also appears to be able to travel between all 3 levels of Penacony freely, hostile bloodhounds aside. So, if Misha is the crying child, then who is Mikhail? Thankfully, Actually, we don't have to look far for the answer. In Misha's voice lines and character story, we learn a little bit about Misha's grandfather. Misha talks about him all over the place, and he obviously cares about him a lot, but for some reason, his grandfather had to leave Penacony behind, and Misha with it. That fits the description of Mikhail pretty well. This also explains what people have been saying about the names Misha and Mikhail actually being different forms of the same name in Russian. People have said this proves Misha and Mikhail are actually the same person because, yeah, same name, same person, I get it. But in the context of this theory, it could just be that Misha was named after his grandfather, and they use a different form of the name Mikhail as a nickname in order to differentiate the two. Grandfather Mikhail, grandson Misha. Simple, right? Well, not exactly. Misha's character story and voice lines seem pretty clear that Mikhail is the grandfather he adores so much, but it tells us a few other interesting things too. In the story attached to the light cone, Indelible Promise, we see Misha being given a gift, or an inheritance as the text calls it, by someone we can assume is his grandfather. It's this little thing right here. Look familiar? It should. I've heard some people say it's a ticket and they're on the right track, but it would actually be better described as a badge, worn by exactly 6 characters in this game. Himiko, Mr. Yang, March 7th, Don Hung, and the Trailblazer, and Misha. Notice a pattern? Besides Misha, this badge is worn exclusively by the crew of the Astral Express. Some people have taken this to mean that at the conclusion of the Penacony arc, Misha will join the Astral Express crew and travel the stars with us. And while I personally would love that, I don't think this is a clue to Misha's future as much as it's a clue to his grandfather's past. As much as Misha wants to travel the stars, I don't think he'll ever end up traveling on the Express. But I do believe his grandfather used to. At the beginning of the quest, Pom Pom asked us to keep our eye out for 3 former Nameless who stayed on Penacony after the Express's last visit. Tiernan the Guard, Rosalina the Surveyor, and Legwork the Mechanic. We were warned going into this that those might not be their real names, and honestly, I have no problems with assuming that Misha's grandfather, Mikhail, is Legwork, the formal Astral Express mechanic, for a couple reasons. Firstly, while we don't hear very much about Misha's grandfather directly, except that he was an adventurer, we do know that Misha is really good at fixing machines, and it's apparently one of his main jobs in the Reverie. Dang, how many duties does this kid have? It is possible that this is a talent he picked up from someone close to him, a mentor or maybe even a grandparent. Also, when Misha's searching for Mikhail in the Primal Dreamscape, he begins his search in a workshop, the kind of workshop a mechanic would have, or maybe even a watchmaker. Now we get to the fun part. Let's quickly recap what we have up to this point. Mikhail boarded the Express as its mechanic under the name Legwork. When he got to Penacony, he, Tiernan, and Rosalina decided to stay. Now, my thought is that Mikhail, who at this point is accustomed to working with machines powered by magical eon power, becomes pretty dang good at making other kinds of magic machines. Maybe even something which is able to harness the abundant memoria in the area to make a giant, beautiful dreamscape, because Penacony is on the edge of a memory zone. I made a short about this. Mikhail is Misha's grandfather, is Legwork the mechanic, is the watchmaker. They are all the same person. I hope you enjoyed today's theory. Psych! This video is only halfway done and it only gets more complicated from here. Here we go! So, there are 2 major glaring holes that still need to be cleared up. 1, why would the watchmaker leave Misha behind on Penacony? He's a child. And 2, how is he still a child? Because the timing just really doesn't add up. Penacony hasn't been an IPC prison for 500 years, and yet it was still a prison when Mikhail arrived there. Assuming that Mikhail is a human with a normal human lifespan, even if he arrived on Penacony as a newborn and lived to be 100 years old, and then had a kid at 100, and then that kid had Misha at 100, which doesn't even... I mean, no. But hypothetically, then Misha would still be over 200 years old. But I have a solution, which we will get to in a moment. First, let me ask you another question. Actually, a question I feel like we should have been asking since our very first Astral Express family meeting where Himiko explained the history of Penacony. How did Penacony become what it is today? Well, you see, it was an IPC prison, and then there was a Stellaron burst, and now it's a luxury vacation destination. Hang on, a Stellaron? You mean the seeds of destruction, the things we've been fighting against every new planet we go to? One of those took an IPC prison and turned it into a paradise? Yeah, pretty much. Alright, seems legit. I will excuse their ignorance only because they are an adorable trash panda. All jokes aside, this legitimately makes no sense as an explanation. We obviously are missing some pieces to this puzzle. Let me just sift through this giant pile of puzzle pieces here. Do any of you see a puzzle piece that looks like it would fit in this suspiciously train-shaped hole? It was the Astral Express. The Astral Express is responsible for the transformation of Penacony. We know from Himiko and Pom Pom that the last time the Express was on Penacony was around 500 years ago, approximately the same time as the Stellaron outbreak. In fact, just based on what I know about this dang train from the 3 places we visited, we seem to pretty much be the Stellaron janitors. Stellarons are our specialty. The source of every problem we run into, even without meaning to, is a Stellaron, and it's been happening since long before Miss Stellaron theirself got here. So, what if the reason the Astral Express even went to Penacony last time was so they could seal the Stellaron that was causing so much trouble? And honestly, that makes me more curious. What did they even encounter when they got here? If you watched my last video on Firefly, I did touch on this a bit, but Stellarons aren't just a one-size-fits-all kind of apocalypse bringer. They aren't like the other girls. No. Rather, they have a habit, at least from what we've seen, of taking the path of a planet they're on and either warping it to use as a weapon against the planet or amplifying it to the point where it's unsustainable. Belobog follows Klipoth, the preservation, so the Stellaron used ice to destroy it. The Eternal Freeze was getting worse when we got there, and it's implied that it would eventually get to the point where it just freezes the entire civilization at a point in time, which would effectively preserve it in a sense, but not in the way it was meant to be preserved. From the databank, we learn Klipoth's definition of preservation is to sustain a civilization, preserving it specifically so it can continue. The Stellaron took that preservation and distorted it horrifically. Similarly, the people of the Sienja Lafu were meant to keep the Tree of Abundance safe, to protect it and guard it. So the Stellaron was like, oh, you love this tree so much, let's make it grow again. Which does go along with the Sienjo's purpose on a surface level, but it ignores all the reasons why they carry out this duty, to keep the tree's fruit from being used again to give a cursed version of eternal life. So if we were to take this pattern that the Stellarons seem to follow and apply it to Penacony, a place that can make dreams come true, what would that look like? What did Tiernan, Legwork, and Rosalina encounter when they first arrived here? Even back then, Penacony was still full of memoria and revolved around this idea of bringing wishes and memories to life, causing people to see what they most desired, most treasured, most wanted, etc. That is its natural state. So what does it look like when that gets twisted? What I'm about to say is completely speculative. I don't have any proof behind this, although I feel like it is very uncontradictory to the rest of the theory. But it is my thought that this particular Stellaron contorted the memoria around it to protect itself by turning the prison into a psychic maze of sorts, made of hundreds of memory spirits moshed together, regrets, fears, and traumatic experiences. It would make it so that you have to fight against the echoes of your own past to defeat it. This is what I think the Nameless had to battle through to seal this Stellaron. Okay. So, depending on what kind of people we're dealing with in this situation, after getting through the trauma of rehashing their own past a bit, it's entirely possible that one of the group looked at this newly sealed Stellaron and said, hey, what if we made it do it again, this time for therapy? With a little trial and error and partially unsealing this cosmic bomb. The dreamscape that could bring about good dreams was invented. They had a literal seed of destruction, and their first thought was capitalism. I'm starting to see why they based Penacony off of America. Okay, let's go back to Misha and our 2 little plot holes that we still have to answer. Well, actually, there are 3. The third one has to do with a few inconsistencies in Misha's voice lines and his interactions with Mikhail. Sometimes he talks about his grandfather as if he's still on Penacony, as if he's just slipped off into the next room and is working on something. Other times he says he's been gone for years. Some things make it sound like elements of the dreamscape were actually inspired by Misha, and other things make it sound like Misha only came after it. This theory could go a few different ways. This is just my favorite one, and by favorite I do mean most heartbreaking. My theory is that Misha isn't the real Misha. You remember how I said before that the Stellaron, before it was sealed, might have used people's past regrets as a shield to defend itself? It's my thought that Mikhail might have actually had a family before boarding the Express, a family he might have even lost. If that's the case, then this encounter with the Stellaron Stellaron would have caused him to miss his family like he hadn't before, and so being a mechanic who specialized in magical machines, he poured his grief into a new creation. Something far more complex and beautiful than any clock or machine he'd made before. He made a puppet in the near exact image of his own grandson, giving it life, maybe even using the memoria abundant around him to synthesize some of his real grandson's memories. And he even gave it his grandson's name, Misha. If I had a nickel for every time a mysterious crying child turned out to actually be a robot created by a grief-stricken franchise-owning parent, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird. Very much so that it happened twice. And look, I know it feels like a stretch, but this actually explains a handful of things that just feel odd otherwise. For one thing, it solves our timeline issue. Misha actually is more than 200 years old. He's just not human, so he doesn't age. He calls Sunday young, despite Sunday appearing much older than him. It explains his strange keyhole eyes, which I don't believe are just a stylistic choice. It explains the strange ticking of clocks all around us in the child's dream. I mean, yeah, we're surrounded by clocks, but if we're inside Misha's head, just think about what that sounds like. Him being able to hear all his own motors and servos and mechanics functioning. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. As long as you're not having nightmares, I mean. The fourth thing this explains requires a bit of explanation in itself, so let me start by asking a simple question. If the Penacony Stellaron was used to create this magnificent dreamscape, where is it now? Mikhail isn't here anymore, but the dreamscape is still up and running, so it's clear that wherever he went, he didn't take it with him. I know we've been told that Penacony's effectively sinking into the memory zone, and that's why the nightmares are running rampant in the Reverie, but honestly, I'm taking this with a grain of salt because it came from Black Swan, who very clearly has some ulterior motives of her own, and I'm pretty sure we don't know them yet. I think it's far more likely, especially if this Stellaron follows the trend of past ones, in utilizing the planet's intrinsic nature to destroy it, that the Stellaron has somehow become unsealed, and is reverting back to using people's pasts against them, like how we saw Misha's past in the Primal Dreamscape. Well, lucky for us theorists, this is the very thing that gives us our best clue to where it is. In the Primal Dreamscape, in one of Misha's lines to Mikhail, he promises earnestly, "I will definitely keep it safe." Now, we aren't told or given any description of what he's keeping safe, but judging by what Misha says and how he says it, this conversation takes place right before Mikhail leaves. I think it's safe to say that he is entrusting the Stellaron, the power source of Penacony, the Watchmaker's legacy, to Misha's care. Misha has the Stellaron. But where? In the inescapable room in the Primal Dreamscape where we first face off against... Fine. Where we first face off against the meme, we hear Misha shouting about a box. Well, what box? We opened a chest when we first entered the trap room, but the only thing in that was a mysterious, unknown puzzle piece that the description says belongs to a dreamscape puzzle. I think the box Misha's talking about is something different entirely. I'll be honest, I don't know of any other literal box in any level of the dreamscape we currently have access to. But I do know of a lock that could potentially open one. Yeah, I think Misha is the box. A vessel for the Penacony Stellaron, just like we are for the Herta space station one. I explained some of this in my Firefly video, how this would explain why only Misha and the Trailblazer can see the Memoria spirits. If the Memoria are linked to the Stellaron, used by it to create the dreamscape, then it just makes sense that our sensitivity to the Memoria would be different, just like we've seen. We're on the same wavelength with them because we are also connected to a Stellaron. This also explains why Misha appeared in our dream even before we arrived in Penacony. We've already seen it happen where we have a strong link to others who have a connection to the Stellaron, like how we heard Kokolia's conversations with the Belobog Stellaron in our dreams. How much stronger would that connection be if both of us are in the same dream together? I feel like this also explains why Misha is Path of Destruction. It's implied that paths are something you choose in the Star Rail universe and aren't necessarily connected to intrinsic qualities. However, when we woke up on the Herta space station after being used as a Stellaron box, Yeah, we are automatically assigned Path of Destruction because we have a seed of destruction inside us. Now, not every destruction character is going to have a connection to a Stellaron, but if you look at the 9 destruction characters currently in the Star Rail roster, 7 of those 9 have made a conscious choice. They have in some way chosen destruction. Jing Liu choosing to cut the stars down from the sky, Imbibitor Lune burning the world down rather than losing Baihang, Blade and Arlen in a constant cycle of destroying themselves, Hook, who's just Hook, even Svarog's complete willingness to go nuclear to protect Clara. All of them make a conscious choice to destroy something or someone. Misha and the Trailblazer are the only outliers on that list, and depending on your playstyle, maybe not even the Trailblazer. Misha may be a bit clumsy, but at no point have we seen him wake up and choose violence. Or fall asleep and choose violence? I don't know, we're in a dreamscape, everything's wibbly wobbly. As far as characters go, he would actually fit in a lot better with the Harmony or Preservation lineup, as he is 1, the literal assistant to everyone who enters the hotel, and 2, the person who was entrusted with preserving Penacony after the Watchmaker left. And yet, he's destruction. I think it's because right now, he has no choice, because he's linked to a seed of destruction. This path is his, whether he wants it or not. Okay, so let's recap again just to make sure we're all tracking. Mikhail boards the Express as an engineer under the pseudonym Legwork, assumedly after the loss of his family, and traveled the cosmos to banish his regrets. Eventually, the Express got word of a Stellaron ravaging the IPC prison in the Asdana system and went to help. There, he, Tiernan, and Rosalina fought through the psychic maze of Stellaron corruption to seal it. After that was settled, he has the idea to recreate the nightmare, but under controlled conditions so they could then reshape it into a beautiful dreamscape. And the 3 of them stayed on Penacony when the Express left in order to make this dream a reality. The encounter with the Stellaron caused him to think back to his family, and now with them fresh in his mind, he began work on his greatest creation, an autonomous puppet, in the image of his grandson, given life and thought and imagination and memory by the memoria around him. Misha was an energetic and adorable child, but he could not replace what Mikhail had lost. And so as the years waned, he decided to return to the stars, living out the rest of his life in adventure. Although Misha begged to come with him, the Watchmaker knew Misha belonged here, so he bestowed Misha with the Stellaron, a nameless badge, and a promise to keep Penacony safe. Mikhail then left. Where? We have no idea. So this is where I need to cut in and give you guys some new information. Mikhail was the original Watchmaker of Penacony. He made the dreamscape, but not the one we're familiar with. He made a land where dreams could come true, yes, but some of the things we love most about Penacony, the lovable characters running around, the origami birds, Clocky, Boss Stone, these are all characters credited to the Watchmaker, but none of that was Mikhail's doing. That was all Misha. In Misha's character stories and voice lines, we learn that he held out hope of his grandfather's return for a long time, but in the end, he could only find comfort in his imaginary friends, Mr. Soda, Miss Mirror, Clocky, and Origami Bird. He would dream up adventures with them, traveling the high seas, adventuring in the stars, and because of Misha's close connection to the Stellaron, these adventures spilled over into the larger dreamscape. Mikhail didn't just give Misha a Stellaron and an Astral Express badge when he left. He effectively passed down the mantle of Watchmaker. Misha may or may not have known this when he accepted them, but as time went on, I'm sure he began to realize it more and more, and did his best to be a gracious host to those who came to visit the dream. He did his best to tuck away his grief at losing his grandfather, the fear that he'd been discarded. No one knew just how important he was to Penacony. Eventually, the family took over, and for a long time, all was well. But then things started to go wrong. Parts of the dream began to be corrupted, to sink or collapse. Maybe the Stellaron became unstable again. Maybe it was only a matter of time. Maybe Misha's grief finally began to catch up with him. It all came to a head when 2 kids found their way into the primal dreamscape, one of them looking for the Watchmaker's legacy, the Stellaron. She wanted to take his grandfather's most important gift from him, the thing he'd sworn with all his heart to protect. And even in his subconscious connection to the dream, he decided he would never let that happen, no matter what he had to do. And so he killed her.